started in discussing, and it comes up very often, that we say world is known through tangibility. And that's why when the world was initially created, it was dark, which means that you can know objects in the world only by touch. Then there was light, and it's a completely different world. Why is that so closely related to world? That if it's world, you can know it only by touch, not by any other way. And if it's another way, we say it's a novel thing. It's not worldly. It's something added to the world that is super worldly. The principle in this is quite clear and quite simple. World is a created entity, meaning to say that it does not have a basis, a fundamental presence of its own. It exists only because it was created, and it exists only where and at the level and within the parameters that it was created, which means, from our perspective, in terms of our experience, when do you find out about something in the world? When it hits you. When you touch it and you can't walk through it. In other words, world is known by its effect, not by its presence, by its truth. It doesn't have a truth. This is the principle that world is known by touch. When you touch something, what is the experience of touch? You put your hand on something and you feel it. The reason that you feel it is not just because you have sensitivity in your fingers. It's because that object stops your hands from moving. You can't move it any further. You put the hand on the table. The table says, okay, this is the end of your movement. And that's how you know that there is something there. This is the limit of world. It exists when it has an effect. It does not exist on the primary level. This is why we're saying sight, which enables us to see an object without being in touch with it, without being affected by it, is a godly gift. And it truly reveals another dimension in the world. That there is really a truth in the world. That the world really is a godly creation, and therefore there is a godly element in it, and this is why there is that truth in it, that you could recognize its truth, even if it doesn't affect you, even if you don't touch it. And this is why we explain all the time that when it comes to sight, sight relates to the reality, the truth of a situation, not to the physical presence. Physical presence is on the touch level. Like we said, a clock on the wall, for example, coming back, there's every example, every instance that we took has a similar need. A clock on the wall represents a human, a living element, a truth, a significance, not just a physical presence. A physical presence you know only by touch, because it doesn't have a presence on its own. This brings us directly to the worldly view of sight, of light, where they stripped from light the godly element. And they said, what is light? Light is a beam of energy. And as it travels, it hits a physical object. The physical object stops it from moving and deflects it. And this is the effect of light, of sight. In other words, you see the object because it touches you. That's a stripped down principle of sight. Sight is a ruch nizike. And in koichas nefesh, sight relates to chokhmah. In contrast to bino, which has hasoga, which has a touch element, Chokhmah does not have a touch element, does not have a definition of what you see. You just see reality as it is, because it's real. This is what we've been repeating, for the longest time. Coming back to what I think. So, as a result of the tzimtzum of the alakus that comes down into the world, and it comes to the point where it becomes memaale kol olmin, it comes to the point where it's being reduced to that level where it can be contained in a keli, then we in the world it is possible to have a hasaga in that, because it has that definitive element, even though, as we said repetitively lately, we have to focus not on the limits, on the definitions, but on the oyer element. There's an oyer hamamale. But our first relationship to oil is through memaale, on the level of a definitive level of a limit. Oil without a definition, we cannot see it. When the oil comes through in a certain manner that it can be contained in a keli, it can be represented in some kind of a presence, then we can understand not only the present, not only the keli, but also the oil. Exactly what we just now discussed, that physically speaking we see because there's a physical phenomenon in the sight, but as a result of this phenomenon of physical sight, we realize something very special, something very unique, that we are able to relate to an object, a physical object, at a distance, without coming in touch with it, which means it gives us a sense that there is some kind of a reality, some kind of a truth, on a very limited level, but through this limit, through this memaale, we get to a sense of oyer, of a godly reality. The Ali days there, okay, now we're finally 5 lines from the bottom, on page AyinBase 14. The line begins with Gan Eiden. Okay, we are in Gan Eiden, and towards the end of that line, and then as a result of this, of recognizing and understanding this oyer, hamemale, yoidim, then we get to know gam as ha'oyer in sovev hamufle mehoyros. Also, and even the oyer in sovev that is completely remote and mufle, that is remote, separate, is above, and from a world perspective it be a mufle. Mufle means a pella. World cannot begin to understand what it is. In other words, something, an oyer, that does not manifest in worldly terms, and yet we can get to know it, and we can get to know it for certain. The certainty of its presence, even though we don't have a hasaga in it, because hasaga has to have some kind of a keli, some kind of a grasp. There's no grasp, but it's sovev. It's ein sovev. But nevertheless, we get to know and sense the presence of oyer hamufle mehoilamos. Again, what is this all about? We get to know this, we get to know this. This is all about the principle of creation. As we said before, the principle of creation, as Isaiah says and so forth, that it is in order that God be known. It begins, the knowing of God begins at the level of memaale kol olmin, but then When one recognizes the oir hamamale, then he gets to know oir hamufle mi'oilam. Bechina sovev kol almin. And again, this is called sovev kol almin. Sovev kol almin means it encompasses all worlds. The point in this is that it is not oir that is completely unrelated to worlds altogether. The oil the way it is on the godly level itself. It has to do with world, but it has to do with world not in the content of world, but in the presence of world. What allows world to be? This is why I say to give us an inkling. I hope I don't lose you, please. On the principle of sovev kol almin. So we always quote what the Gemara says, Odem shein lebayis einei odem. And then we go down into this bayis. We say a house is not just four walls. It's a house with all kinds of human accommodations. But these accommodations are possible only if there is a house to contain them. If you have all the accommodations, all the kelim of a house, without a house, they are out of place. They have no significance. They don't speak for the same language. If they are in a house, if they are contained in some kind of reality, there is a home, then there's a table and chairs and everything else. So sovev kol almin provides for the possibility of memaale being real. Okay, there's more to speak. I just wanted to explain. So the Ayin bechina sovev kol almin. This is the oil hamufle mi'oilam. It is remote from world, because world is the actual process, the actual memaale, the actual kelim that it consists in. This is mufle from that, but it is sovev kol almin. It provides for it on a super and supreme manner. This inyan of sovev kol almin, the knowledge of sovev kol almin, this is really a wondrous type of a knowledge. There's nothing to grasp, so how do you know? Memaale kol almin can grasp, we can identify what you know. Sovev kol almin is nothing to grasp, nothing to identify. This knowledge, again, is also in bebchinas ideas hamitzius levad. Either this idea is only merely the ideas hamitzius, the knowledge of its presence. In this case, it means very simply that it exists. The hainu, which means to say, she'onu yoidim, that we know sheyesh mitzius or eiden sovev, that there is such a mitzius, such a presence of eiden sovev hamufle mi'oilam, that is remote from world. How do we know anything that is completely remote from world? Even in terms of mitzius, it's remote from world, and you are in world. And the way we know that is called Yetzias HaMetzius, because it's a kind of a procedural type of knowledge. In other words, this is something which we know by some kind of a logical imperative. But then, as a result of this logical imperative, as we shall see, we get to know its mitzius. Sha'arei move on. How do we know this in mitzius or in Sha'arei, since that move on, it should be self-understood, self-evident. Again, we get to know the Oiran as a result of knowing and understanding the Oiran Mali. And that leads us to know the Oiran Mufla. How so? Since that it is self-evident, understood. That the Etzim of Oiran Soiv, this is Etzim of Oiran Soiv means the Oiran Soiv as it is unto itself, not sovev called olmin, that it encompasses and provides for world. Atmos in itself, Atmos as it Atmos is unto itself. Einoi beyerech liyislabash boilamis. It is not beyerech. It is not in proximity that should be expressed in the world. Okay, so now let's focus in what we are being told over here. Oil ha-mufla me'oilamish is also mufla, also remote. And we find out about it as a result of knowing the oil ha-memaale. And how do we find out? Because we say clearly that Atzmus in Yisof is not b'yerech lislabash bo'ilamis. It's not proximity to lislabash bo'ilamis. How is Atmos and Yisof known without this logic? Now, this logic is to know the sovev kolam. Because Atmos Yisof cannot be mislabish and oilams. You with me?
And therefore, there must be sovev.
Therefore, it must be sovev. How do we know Atmos? Moving Atmos and Yisof ain't a b'yerech lislabash bo'ilamis. So just as you know Atmos and Yisof without any kind of logical imperative, you know sovev also don't take any logical imperative. So the point over here is that this that we know, we don't mean to say we just know it in kind of a remote manner. Like we know Atmos, of course there is Atmos.
That's just innate knowledge.
Just a knowledge which is not evident knowledge. Like the Rambam says, Motzurishin. What do you know about Motzurishin? Motzurishin is not known in any kind of a direct manner. It doesn't go in the category of knowledge. Knowledge means that you have an inkling, you have kind of a relationship to it as a result of this knowledge.
But here we don't speak about Atmos. We speak about Atmos of Ayin Sof.
Yeah, Atmos of Ayin Sof. He says Atmos, the Atmos of Ayin Sof.
I don't get it. Is there two things, Atmos and the Atmos of Ayin Sof?
Yes, there is a difference. But in terms of this discussion, there is no difference. Because Ayin Sof, the Atmos of Ayin Sof, has nothing to do with worlds. It's not any be'er of Sabash Bo'ilamis.
But even on the Oir and Sof, there's also first knowledge.
What?
Even on the Oir and Atmos, you have the knowledge. I mean, you have the idea.
Atmos, Oir and Sof, yes, because everything about Atmos is B'li Gvul. Atmos and the Oir is B'li Gvul, is Ein Sof.
But how do we know that Atmos created oil?
All right, leave that for another time. So the Atmos in Sof this is clear that is not be'erech lislabish bo'ilamis. It cannot be that which is lislabish and ilamis is a reduction of Ayin Sof. It's not olmin sovev as etzem of olmin sovev. Now it's olmin sovev as it is unto itself.
Saying we only know that in a
One second. Let's finish the scene and then we'll eliminate all these questions. Atzmus ein sovev ein be'erach l'slabish bo'ilams. U'mashem yislabish, and that which is mislabish in the world, harei zerag ha'oro levad. That is only merely a ha'ora of Atzmus ein sovev. Not Atzmus ein sovev itself, it's a ha'ora of the ein sovev. What is the difference between the Atzmus ein sovev and the ha'ora of the ein sovev? It's also a ha'ora of ein sovev. And that too, as we said before, in order to come down into the world, it has to be nisamtzim and nismait and so forth. There's an important principle associated with this, and I'm going to take a minute to bring this principle out, and then we'll be able to learn this. We are confronted with, we are exposed to two distinct systems of thought. And it comes in good, it comes in handily to know this. Two systems of thought. One system of thought is through Torah. The other system of thought is through world. The world also knows itself. How does it know itself? You said they know things by testing and by experimenting and so forth. And that which they experiment, that means that this is the reality. And as a result, what is their process of thought of it? This is how they come up with the ridiculous conclusion that human beings have evolved from monkeys. Monkeys is a more fundamental presence in the world. Human beings is more advanced, and they have evolved and developed from monkeys. In other words, you find the world finds itself from within itself. The world has its own reality and finds itself from within itself. We have been given a completely different system of thought, and that is that we know that which is being taught to us, shown and given to us to know. We don't find out anything on our own. How do we know there is a world? The Rebbe once said. How do we know there is a world? Because it says in the Torah, "Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'ha'aretz." That is the beginning of the existence of the world. What is the difference between these two systems? When you say "Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'ha'aretz," it's being presented to you l'hatchila in a manner that lends itself for your knowledge and your understanding in the worldly context. When you come to the world and say, oh, there is a world, you are touching something which is completely remote from you. You don't have you have no idea where it came from. You have no justification how come it's there. You just take to something that is completely remote from your knowledge, and then you formulate a ludicrous type of knowledge, an imaginary reality. Like we said before, the world is known by touch. But touch, this is the limit of the world, because it's not real. When you say, no, that's reality, then you are completely off in attention. This is the principle of here. Oyin sovev ain't be erech mislabish b'ilmus. In other words, the real oyin sovev cannot be mislabish b'ilmus, cannot be contained and represented in world. If there is world, that had to be. This is only what's called the ha'ora. What's meant the ha'ora? The ha'ora means that it has been so formulated to be presented in world, not just the presence of it. What's meant the ha'ora? What is contained in the world? That which has been so reduced that now it is being presented to world, and then that can be mislabish in world. Just as, just want to finish this simple thought. We said our original example was you have to have a home in order to that furnishings should fit. Why? You have a sky. You have the entire environment. Why can't you say the sky is your home? And that provides for you for your furnishings. It's ein b'erech. The Gemara says, the halacha says, that a sukkah cannot be higher than 20 amas. Why? Because up to 20 amas, Odem Yeshe b'tzeil sukkah. Then you have a sense that you're sitting in the tzeil of a sukkah. Above 20 amas, you're not b'tzeil sukkah anymore. So I'd be erech, you don't relate to it. What's the difference between 20 amas? This is a ha'ora. This is something which is low enough that it's meant for you to sense it.
It's mufla mi'olamas. Still it's sensed.
That's right. So that's right. This is sovev olmin, which means it is muf. We know it is still mufla because it's sovev. But it's sovev. I'm saying I explained. Sovev means it encompasses. It relates to the world on a sovev manner, not a memaale manner. So therefore, then you know the mufla. Okay, that's it. Overstayed my welcome. Have a great day.
Yeah. ya